The Mystara project is proud to present Part 10 of the Lore of Mystara series. In this video, we shall cover the Middle Bronze Age, from BC 2000 to BC 1751. A century after the post-Great Reign of Fire elven migrations finished, 2000 BC witnessed many human tribes migrate toward the unfrozen lands of southeast Brune. 3 of these tribes came from the Midlands region, north of the former Oltec Empire. The first tribe were the Nithians, with mixed Nether and Oltec ancestries. From their Oltec roots, their chief deity was the sun immortal, Ra, also known as Rathanos. He is associated with fire, fire-based magic, and fiery energy. Horan also represented the sun, but more in its aspect of bringing light and assisting plants grow. His following stemmed from the Nethers Ixion, and the Oltecs Otzit-Teotl. Isiris, known by the Nether as Valerias, is Horan's lover, and the patroness of romance and peace. Orisis, a uniquely Nithian immortal, was the patron of death and resurrection, mimicking the seasons. Ptah, elsewhere known as Kagya, was followed by artisans. A few Nithians secretly followed the entropic immortal, Thanatos. The second migrating tribe were the Nether-descended Taurali. They were followers of Wotan, also known as Odin All-Father. They had more recently started to follow Donar, also known as Tor. The third tribe were the Nether-descended Makai. They broadly followed the elemental forces of earth, fire, water, and air. Mother Earth, elsewhere known as Terra, was one of their benign immortals. Mother Fire, sometimes called the Queen of Fire, was sometimes deadly, causing volcanoes to erupt. This immortal could have been the Fire Master, ruler of the elemental plane of fire, or possibly the Kopru immortal, Slizak the Lurker. Like Mother Fire, the Old Man of the Sea, also known as Proteus, can be quite destructive. Wotan was probably still revered as the Sky Immortal. The Makai immortals are opposed to the innumerable hordes of Tessis. So, about 500 years after the ice sheets receded from most of southeast Brune, the 3 tribes separately migrated there. Whether it was due to environmental pressure, tribal rivalries, or immortal guidance, these peoples set off across the barren Great Northern Wildlands in the east. But they did not encounter the Ethengarians on their trek. After surviving the harsh wildlands, the tribes entered the Ganalith Valley of the Elves. Confrontation appears to have been avoided, but the humans must not have been invited to stay either. The tribes left the Elven Valley and went through mountain passes to reach the Sea of Grass. Although this steppe was apparently uninhabited by sentient creatures, the tribes did not settle here. They left the Sea of Grass and crossed the misty hills to the south, skirting the Broken Lands to the west. The Nithians and then the Taurali headed southeast across more steppe country, that would become the Canolbarth Forest about 2,700 years later. The Makai took a different path, traveling south through the Streel Plain. However, they did not elect to stay in this rich agricultural region that was apparently uninhabited by sentient creatures. The Nithians reached the region of modern-day Salonika, and mingled with remnant Tamarans there. Over the next few hundred years, the offspring of these liaisons became the Truldar. The Nithians then headed east and crossed the Ultan Tepe Mountains. They emerged into a desert basin, with a mighty river flowing from the northwestern mountains to the center of a fertile coast in the east, before it emptied into the sea via a large delta region. It was decided that this would be their new home, Nithia. They began farming along the banks of the mighty river that they also called Nithia. The Taurali mostly avoided the Tamarans of the Salonika region and crossed the Ultan Tepe Mountains to the south. The Taurali emerged in a land of forested hills, plagued by wolves. They kept moving southward until they reached the Dimrak Forest. They headed southeast, avoiding the Verdia elves to the southwest. They then proceeded east until they emerged from the dark forest into a region of plains that were more to their liking, where they could follow and hunt the bison herds. Meanwhile, the Makai left the Streel Plain and crossed the Black Spires Mountains to the south. They emerged into what appeared to be an uninhabited forest. However, they continued south, drawn by the warmer climate and the call of the sea. They settled coastal subtropical lands between the Malfegi lizardman swamps in the west and the Tamaran city-states dotted along the sea cliff coast. Following these three tribes, the Ethengarians and their spirit animal guides, left the desolate Great Northern Wildlands for the new ice-free lands to the south. They entered the Ganelith Valley of the Elves. Warned by their spirit guides, they proceeded southeast toward the mountain passes. After much hardship through the mountains, the Ethengarians reached the Sea of Grass. To them, a land of bounty, animals, and wild horses to train. With the blessing of the spirit guides, they settle into a semi-nomadic life, practicing some farming to supplement their predominantly meat-based diet. Simultaneous to these migrations, Antalians from the Norvold region migrated south via ships and overland to the previously submerged coastal plain and islands of the northern reaches. They mainly settled the arable river valleys between the Nordisfjord and the Otofjord. Island settlers mainly relied on fishing. The rest of the lowlands were more suited to grazing herds. The Antalians settled in small villages of perhaps 50 people led by a petty war chieftain. They raided one another and the dwarfs and gnomes of the hills and mountains. They practiced shamanistic and rune magic. The human migrations were not restricted to Brún though. Under pressure from a millennia of post-Great Rain of Fire reduction of suitable land and increased volcanic activity, Tanagoran descendants migrated from southeast Scotha to a large bay in northwestern Devania in BC 2000. They decided to colonize the new land they called Izonda. At the same time, elsewhere in Devania, some Thracian tribes migrated from the jungle coast to the Eryptian basin. The Androchian tribe were part of this group. By BC 2000, the beast men had fully evolved into modern humanoids of kobolds, goblins, hobgoblins, orcs, bugbears, ogres, and trolls. Their offspring now consistently bore their parents' ancestry. The beast men who remained in Hyboria in BC 2400 evolved into Arctic species, being Ursus bipedus hyborianus bugbears, Goblinus hyborianus goblins, Homo monstrum bellicosus ogres, Orcus hyborianus orcs and Monstrum erroneus hyborianus trolls. Priest King Gildesh I of the Indukes founds the kingdom of Nimua, meaning our home, in the west of the Orcs Head Peninsula. The first Nemurian cities were built. Also around BC 2000, the Iranians of the western Savage Coast started creating humanoid alter egos and replaced their web cities with towers. They called their realm Herath. They created their own version of lizard men, by magically crossing dragons and humans. They kept these more intelligent lizard men as slaves and servants. The talent of Herathian magic caught the attention of the sphere of energy immortal, Illyric. Under the guise of Negivim, he gained followers among Iranian wizards, as their patron of magic and insensitivity. In return, his followers started making sacrifices to satisfy his greed. In BC 1950, the Porador, Felister, Celebril and Gelbalf clans returned to the highlands surface to live after living in the caverns of the Broken Lands for 1050 years, following the Great Rain of Fire. However, they did not encounter the other elven colonists of the highlands, such as the Belcadese and Trudel clans. Around BC 1900, on the steppes of Scotha, descendants of the Oltec colonists of 3000 BC had evolved into the Genites. The Genites are a nomadic cavalry-based race of warriors. Their land is called Gen, which means green. They conquered the regions of the Bay of Thorin, Tangor Bay, and the Minian coast from other Oltec and some Tanagoran descendants. Sometime between BC 1900 and BC 1700, Terastia was born among the Genite clans. She became a cleric of Otzit-Teotl when she came of age. However, she was offended and abused by the unjust chieftain of her tribe. She killed the chieftain out of revenge and justice, then fled into exile. She survived and grew powerful after a long adventuring career. She then embarked on the path of the Paragon, sponsored by Otzit-Teotl. For her quest, she retrieved Gilgrave's bow. She created the solar lash of retribution for her trial, a magical whip fabricated from horsehair and sunlight. She formed her own clan, in which she presided as chieftainess, high priestess, chief judge and executioner. Under her leadership, 6 of her clergy gained 12 levels. She also transformed part of the steppe in a 100-mile radius to an area of perpetual golden light where unjust actions are detected by her clergy. Energy and light-loving creatures were drawn to this place. For her task she duelled 7 high-level clerics and 1 mage, using insect plague to disrupt their spellcasting. Upon completion of the last duel, Terastia ascended as the immortal patron of justice and revenge. The Genites began to follow her as their chief immortal. In BC 1800, the immortal Cagyar the artisan was concerned for the survival of the old dwarfs, who had been slowly dying out from diseases contracted from the Great Rain of Fire, and conflicts with the new influx of humans. He transported half of the remaining 1,000 dwarfs to the Hollow World, featuring the Kogulla clan, and then reshaped the other healthier half into a newer and tougher dwarven race. Cagyar, with the aid of immortals from the spheres of time, possibly Proteus, and energy, possibly Tor, created underground rivers, lakes, and caverns beneath the mountains of Dengar for the new dwarfs to inhabit. Cagyar created a sentient granite golem, Denwarf, to lead the new dwarfs as their first king. He programmed Denwarf to establish a new form of government, a new dwarven way of life, protect the dwarfs until they built a strong state, and then to leave them to self-govern. Cagyar placed Denwarf and the new dwarfs in their original mountains, on the slopes of the highest mountain of the spur. They call this peak Evrast, meaning high mountain, and adopt it as their clan name. Other new dwarfs are returned to the northern reaches and were the ancestors of the Modrigsvurg clan. All the new dwarfs were given false memories by Cagyar so that they believed the northern reaches dwarfs were exiled from Dengar for pursuing forbidden law and trafficking with dark powers. Cagyar grants clerical powers to select dwarfs. Over the next 4 centuries, Cagyar occasionally checked on the dwarfs, who had cautiously started expanding their population, mines, and settlements under Denwarf's guidance. Ilsundol the Wise creates the first tree of life in the Sylvan realm and attains immortality in the sphere of energy. At Urzud, Chief Yogo the Fool of the Black Toes Horde discovered a blue knife and reported to the other humanoids that he knew that it came from the south and how it was made. Chief Ungared Fist of the Yellow Eyes Horde captured Yogo and the knife, which started the Steel Wars. The tribe split into 3 warring hordes and many clans fled. The population dwindled from war, plague, and famine over the next 75 years. Sometime between BC 1800 and BC 1722, the Modrigsvurg mastercrafters, Brock and Sindri craft the war hammer, Mjolnir, for Tor. Sometime between BC 1800 and BC 1400, the dwarven hero Torcress, meaning strong tooth, founded his own militaristic clan which becomes known as Torcrest. This concludes our look at the Middle Bronze Age era, spanning BC 2000 to BC 1751.